Despite everything to prevent it, the unthinkable has happened. You are on a yachting race and you see before your very eyes a vessel or crew member in immediate distress. What should your thought process be? What are your legal and moral obligations, not just to the other boat in distress, but also to the danger that you could potentially put your own vessel and crew, and perhaps others, in doing the wrong thing? Do you have your thought ducks in a row? Most don't. According to a U.S. Coast Guard recreational boating statistics report, most skippers are willing to help, but less than 30% know how to effectively respond. So hi everybody, this is Captain Tom again. I'm a longtime United States Coast Guard Master Mariner and have been in this situation more than once. In this video, we're going to talk about what our responsibilities and obligations are when a vessel or crew member of that vessel are in distress. First, we'll go to the books and look at the Call Regs, the main maritime legal foundation, and also take a brief look at the history with what is considered the most popular legal precedent that helped create the Call Regs rules, and then how the Racing Rules of Sailing, the RRS, interpreted this as well. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so don't worry. This part will be informative but very brief. The real meat and potatoes of this video is how we should interpret our responsibilities and obligations when we are making split-second decisions about taking action. Just to be clear, we're not going to talk about what to do, but what we should be immediately thinking of when this situation happens. So let's jump in, figuratively speaking, of course. First, let's look at the Call Regs book page that deals with this. I believe that these are the key phrases. It uses the word shall, not consider or not may. Then there's the statement, render assistance to any individual in danger of being lost. Notice it doesn't say vessel being lost. And what is lost? Hold that thought. We'll get into that in a moment. Also notice that it doesn't indicate that the request for assistance is a prerequisite. It is up to the master or individual in charge, meaning us, to determine this. But then we have the caveat clause, can do so without serious danger to vessel or individuals. In a different part of the Call Regs, it connects the term distress and in need of assistance. Now let's look where this historically came from. The most famous of these, I believe, is the case of the American ship Eleanor in 1809. 1809. Oh yeah, good old Napoleon, Battle of Trafalgar, War of 1812 and all of that stuff. A dicey time to be in distress at sea with cannonballs flying around and unfriendly ports where an innocent mariner could end up with serious neck damage regardless of what favorite method the country used. The Eleanor was an American ship that was forced by its distress to enter a hostile British port. The outcome of the case, made by the British Admiralty no less, was that the Eleanor had sufficient passport to enter a British port and not have its vessel, cargo, and crew seized. The case affirmed the meaning of distress. Bingo! Thus, the usage in the modern Call Regs. But it gives conditions that the assistance be from an irresistible situation and a grave necessity. Remember those two phrases. We'll use them later. So this case was not the first, but was a crucial precedent that continues to be cited and still has meaning for us in everyday on-the-water activities. Now we have the legal glue that connects the word distress in the call regs with the shall render assistance. The call regs calls it a duty. I also believe the call regs danger of being lost phrase can be correlated with the grave necessity. So let's look at the RRS for a moment. This is Rule 1.1, right up front. It says essentially the same thing with the word shall, with the caveat of possible, and gives it racing context by assigning responsibility to all participants or organizing staff of a race. In a recent poll I made on this channel, 75% of respondents to the question about responding to a race incident involving an untethered person going overboard was that assistance was required without exception. The willingness of the mariner we talked about earlier comes out loud and clear here. However, let's stop and think about that with the without exception statement. Does that mean every capsize in a dinghy race mandates that all participants and race staff rush to assistance? I've had, and I know I'm not alone, more than one hair-raising capsize per race. I know many of my competitors even capsized on the same gust of wind. So I think not, but not so fast, as we'll discuss later. Remember that the call regs gives us some leeway in determining the danger of being lost to our own judgment. On the other hand, let's consider an offshore race, and I've been at one where this happened, and I was a part of. A person slipped overboard and was quickly lost within just a second or two in anticlimactic conditions in broad daylight. No hair-raising capsize drama, only a tragedy when people least expected it. In that case, the PRO, and that's the primary race officer, rightly declared the race game over right then, and as many boats as possible went into a search pattern. So where do we draw the line? I personally give a lot of thought to the Eleanor case and the phrase grave necessity as part of the distress situation. Some things I consider: daylight versus night or approaching darkness, temperature of the water, the sea state, big waves and or current, perceived skill of the person overboard, the circumstances of how the person went overboard. Could they be badly injured? I also think that one factor can outweigh all the others. There is a famous Olympic case in 1988, Busan, Korea, where an Olympic-level athlete, during a competition, rendered what they felt was needed assistance to another elite athlete. The heavy seas around Busan at the time outweighed even an expert skill level and created a grave necessity in the opinion of the assister. Hold on to that story though. We'll talk about that in another video. It's a very interesting one that gives us a resolution path as to what can happen to our own race as we provide assistance. It's a good insight into the spirit of the law for the call regs and RRS. Don't think for a second that if you give assistance to someone during a race, that you are somehow throwing your race away. Far from it. And it may actually be the other way around if you don't. Now let's talk about the word possible and compare it with the without exception as stated in the poll response. Would we really not take any exceptions and put our crew and vessel at risk to compound the crisis if we ran aground or cause a serious collision or some other dangerous situation? Hopefully common sense and not political correctness rules here in reality. Some things I look at situationally are navigation risks, risk of other collisions, especially in reduced visibility and high speed, the state of our own crew. Maybe you have some others. I'd love to hear from you. Remember that the coal regs and the RRS rely on us to make these judgments. They can't do it for us. We determine our own risk. We must choose wisely, not by dictate. Another is the availability of better outside efficient help. We also must consider how far that other assistance is away, especially when time is of the essence, which it usually is, of course. On an offshore race, that distance to another source of assistance could be many, many miles, even more than 1,000. The best way to assist may be to actually actively delegate that to another vessel. My mantra is, be a help, but don't aspire to be a hero. And lastly, let's consider the word shall, which is used in the Eleanor case, the coal rigs, and RRS. I think this is the most unambiguous clause. But even here, not so fast. I interpret this as assistance must be given as the default action if it even reasonably appears to be true distress and doesn't put our vessel or crew at risk. Not just when assistance is requested, which is what about 25% of the poll respondents stated. Sometimes that assistance is as minor as a response from the other competitor with a wave of the hand to signal, "We're okay, please go ahead." But I never proceed without some sort of confirmation. Sometimes it's even just a smile. But how shall we engage if we don't get that? That, of course, is important to know too, but that's the subject of a much more thorough safety at sea course, or at least many other videos. And I would add, practice with the crew in implementation. The challenge to you as a skipper is when your moment happens, and it will happen if you are out on the water long enough, is to have all of these thoughts preloaded and be able to make calm and decisive decisions that can mean the difference between life and death. Do you have some stories or additional thoughts? We'd love to hear from you. If you like this content, please click that like button and consider becoming a subscriber. No risk to you. I have other content I've already created on this channel, as well as I'm planning to create new content, some of it by viewer request. Got ideas? Got it clicked? A heartfelt thanks. Until then, now that you know that you have an obligation to give assistance, now it's time to get familiar with how to give assistance when you have a fellow competitor in trouble. Get ready.